Hey guys, it's Xygor here. Season 2 in Diablo 4 is almost upon us, so I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about a few of the changes, especially in regard to the Barbarian class, that will really impact the gameplay, and also tell you about how I'm approaching Season 2. So this guide will be kind of a quick summary about some of the changes that are coming down the pipeline, and how I think Barbarians should approach Season 2. So let's just get right into it. I'm going to start off talking a little bit about the changes. So one of the most major changes to Barbarians is that the unique items overall have been totally revamped. Almost every unique has been changed and improved in a way, which is great because they kind of fiddled a little bit with these items before, a select few of them, but they really have kind of taken strides to make some of these really good. Ramaladni's Magnum Opus. This one could be a very good item, one-hander for several builds if you get it soon. It's not that attractive to me in the end game. Azure Wrath, I'm not really looking at that. Hellhammer could be really good if you're doing an upheaval build. Ancient's Oath, I haven't really taken a look at that. I don't think that will fit into many builds. Same with Overkill. Fields of Crimson could be interesting in a Rupture build. That was kind of overpowered and bugged for a while, so we'll have to see how that pans out. I'm going to be playing a Whirlwind Bleed build again, but unfortunately Barber is going to be taken out of the game because the Season 1 is completely ended, but we'll have some new powers that should actually make it really powerful too. Battle Trance could be an attractive option if you're going for Frenzy, but I think this is going to require some testing and it's not going to fit into the build I'm initially going for. Same with 100,000 Steps. I don't see a use case for it in my plan build. Rage of Harrogath is interesting because this was probably the best Barbarian unique that existed, and they're buffing it a bit so you'll get more damage reduction from it, which is great because that's the thing it lacked before. It has a pretty cool ability, but it's getting buffed. Gore's is really interesting. So with Gore's Devastating Grips, this was an item that they've nerfed like basically 3 times, and now they're finally buffing it back and making it attractive. So I'm going to take a look at using this, and we'll talk a little bit about how I think it can be used in a second. Other than the revamped uniques, the things that are going to impact Barbarians the most is they've decided to change the system for fortification to base fortification abilities and fortification itself off of your maximum life rather than your base life. This is going to be a big improvement to Fortify. And it's going to be interesting because there's a lot of things in the game that is going to increase your life way higher than it was in Season 1. In fact, the new item maximum is 925. So that's going to be really interesting. We're going to get a lot more health, and Fortify should be a lot better, which is great because that segues into the next thing I want to talk about, and that's the armor. Armor has essentially been nerfed that it will not give you elemental resistances anymore. You're going to be able to get elemental resistances out of your jewelry, and it's additive now. So if you have 2 items with 20 magic resistance to fire, you're going to get 40 total. It sounds like they really want you to be able to max this out by around level 80, so I'm not too worried about it. And they also did this to try to help, Necros and Sorceress in general, because they were really suffering with survivability. We'll talk a little bit about the aspects later, but with Disobedience, I'm not too worried about being able to take advantage still of all the mitigation options that we do have. Experience is going to be higher. We're going to get more experience as we go along. They said leveling to 100 is about 40% faster. I'm going to be focusing on 2 things to level up to 100. I'm going to do it mostly on the overworld. Legion events and the Whisper events. So Whisper events are going to give you, allocations toward the Tree of Whispers turn-ins. The dungeons that you get are 5 each. So if you can plow through a few of those dungeons, rack up a bunch of items, and do a bunch of turn-ins, that's going to be great. Other than that, they didn't change a lot of the Barbarian skills too much. They did do some tweaks, and to the passives, you get a little bit more fury gain from Endless Fury and things like that. And they did do some tweaks to the Paragon board. So I'm going to show you a perspective build that I'm going to essentially roll with when it comes to Season 2. And here's what I'm thinking. So let's just start with the gear and the gems and the vampiric powers first off. So first off, this is not an ideal setup. You're going to have increased chance to get what they're calling uber uniques. So the Shaco, so the Harlequin head, and Grandfather. I think those two things will fit into these builds in these two slots respectively, but that's not, you know, a given. So this is kind of what I think is going to be my ideal as I go into it, planning to do a whirlwind build. So Tuskhelm of Jorrits the Mighty, this is going to be a new item that they brought into the game in this season. When you're berserking, you have a chance to be even more berserk, which not only does more damage, but increases your fury per second and gives you more cooldown. This seems like it could be really good because my build is going to be based off berserking uptime. It's just going to have so many things that increase that, and this could be really good, but this has kind of a barrier to entry in that you need to have a lot of berserking uptime before it becomes good. So I think this is ideal at some point, but we'll have to kind of see how it works. Relentless Berserker's aspect, I'm putting this on my chest. The whole build essentially revolves around this aspect. You're going to get berserking uptime when you use core skills, and we're always using core skills. We'll be doing that with our Whirlwind. Rage of Haragoth can also go here. This is something I'm going to be testing. Rage of Haragoth, it got buffed a little bit, and it's already pretty good. But I think there might be chances that we have enough cooldown as it is, even without the Rage of Haragoth. But the cool thing is that Gores comes into play too because it's so good now. You're going to get plus damage and plus crit chance to close enemies now. The thing that I'm interested in is how much the damage bonus is, because if the damage bonus rolls what it's replacing right now, it's replacing... Let's see, it's replacing the attack speed, which was a useless roll on a Whirlwind build. That can just be potentially huge. I'm sorry, the non-physical damage is replaced by damage, and attack speed is replaced by critical strike against close. But this non-physical damage affix, this can roll up to, I think it's 32% in Season 1. So if this can roll up to 32% damage, that should be ridiculous and makes this worth using, especially because it pulses out those damage kind of explosions, which could make it really good. So this is going to be one of the most interesting things that I'm going to be following for this build. I'm going to be using 2 out of 3. So I'm going to be using the Helm, Rage of Haragoth, and or Gores, and then the last piece that is not as good, I'm going to put this affix on. It's too good, we can't leave this out. Some people are not choosing to do Gores, it seems like, but I'm going to try multiple combinations. Alright, Tybalt's Will Legs. This is also a new unique. This is going to give you increased damage while you're unstoppable and for 4 seconds afterward. And you're going to get unstoppable a lot. We're going to get unstoppable not only by Rallying Cry, but also Wrath of the Berserker. I'm going to take Wrath of the Berserker here. And as you'll see in my skill tree, instead of Iron Skin to start, these two mechanisms will allow you to be unstoppable. And if we have enough uptime, we should always essentially get this bonus. Plus 50 of your primary resource. This should be really good. I don't think Temerity is going to be necessary here, or a pure mitigation pants anymore, because we're going to be able to get, you know, so much damage reduction elsewhere. Boots, still got the Ghost Walker. This is kind of basically boilerplate from last season. It's just too good for speed farming, and we're going to want to have it because we're going to be unstoppable a lot, like I just talked about, so you're going to get a lot of movement speed. Alright, weapons. So, Aspect of Berserker, Berserk Ripping. I'm not sure if this or Limitless Rage will be better. But if we do end up getting Grandfather, which again, it's an uber unique, I think I'm going to test both. So let's say I get a Grandfather, that's going to be the optimal. I'll check both Limitless Rage or Berserk Ripping here. Otherwise, non-ideal setup. I think you want both of them on your two-handers. Slash is going to be the most ideal for bleeding, I believe. and because we can then take axe. I think there's a setup where we can take two-handed mace too, but I'm just gonna figure on the sword for now. But you should be able to use different weapons. Edge Masters on one of your items. This one will snapshot into your whirlwinds. Very good. Same with Expectant. You do 3 basic skills. That's your lunging strike, and then you whirlwind. It snapshots it into it. That we need to have. Here's the fun one. Aspect of Disobedience is getting buffed up to 66%, and that doesn't include the bonus you get for putting it in your neck, which is 1.5. So this is going to go up to 99%. This is essentially going to double your armor, and there's so many things to get armor. This should be really fun to play around with. I think you're basically going to be able to max out your armor with this, and that's why we're putting it in the neck. You know, there's some different things you can play around with to basically change the slots around. Like you could put the Berserk Ripping here in Disobedience. I'm sorry, you could put this on like your pants or your helm if you don't have one of these, not the weapon. But you can play around with it a little bit, but I think neck is ideal. With rings, we want Aspect of Echoing Fury and Bold Chieftains just like before. Hopefully, any barb wants to get these 2 right away. So hopefully at least one of these 2 is in the codex that we get for the seasonal bonus. Like last season we had Bold Chieftain's aspect there, and it was easy to get that at a 1 second pretty early. We need to see that again. If we don't see that, these are both pretty rare. But basically not much has changed here. You're going to want Lucky Hit and Crit Strike, Crit Damage. You're not going to want Vuln. So actually I'm going to tweak that. Instead of Vuln, we want Berserking, damage while Berserking. Or damage to close enemies is also good. So basically you're going to want almost the same thing as last season, but instead of the Vuln, you just don't want it because they kind of nerfed it. Vuln just is not as good as it was before. They've done a system where they're trying to kind of equalize it. So we're going to put damage while berserking there. Ideally, those are the stats you want, but you can get, instead of damage while berserking, damage to close. Instead, 2 should be really good. We already talked about the weapons. Let's talk about the jewelry. Weapon, we want damage over time. This is going to be a bleed build, so we're going to do damage over time with the amethyst. Again, vulnerability, just not as good. We're going to play with this time. Armor, you can go with fortified with the blue gem or red. I think the red's just going to be so much better now because it's going to give you default fortification anyway because it goes off your max life. And you're already going to have a lot of fortified anyways. Jewelry, we're going to do skull. It's just more armor. We might have so much armor that feeds into our bonus, and then we're getting double here, that it's just so good. You may want to play around with life on kill if you have so much anyways, but we're going to have to see how that works. Skills, we got the 3 shouts. Not much new there. We have Wrath of the Berserker. They buffed this a little bit, and we'll talk about why. As far as the damage was taken down a bit, but it is better in some respects too. Lunging Strike and Whirlwind. We got the Axe as the expertise because that's the best expertise to have. Skill tree, Lunging Strike. We got Whirlwind over to the Focus Whirlwind. This gives us a bleed, which is a lot of the basis of this build. We're not going to need Pressure Point this season. Imposing Presence, I have 2 here, just more life. More life is great, and again, helps your fortified anyways. Rallying Cry, this season, I don't think I'm going to stack it up to 5. But we'll have to see how that works. Actually, I think I will, because I had Iron Skin here. We're going to take away Iron Skin and put those points into Rallying Cry. Because we're going to go Wrath of the Berserker this time. So 4 in Rallying Cry, down to the Tactical Rallying Cry. This is kind of your bread and butter Fury generation. This is your bread and butter mitigation. Challenging Shout up to 5. Lots of just pure damage reduction here. Can't beat it. And you're going to get the one where you gain Fury each time you take damage. You'll still take damage even though your armor should be just insane. War Cry. This one just 1 to the original down to Power War Cry. Again, this is just berserking and damage. It's really good. Booming voice. This is your shout duration. You need that. Everything revolves around your shouts. And heals. 3% healing per second. You're going to be shouting all the time. Guttural yell, just that extra reduction. Aggressive resistance. This is going to give you more damage reduction. You can go with these, but I don't actually think you're going to need this one, which we did kind of before, because of what I'll talk about in a second. Swiftness, you always want movement speed up to 3 max. We're a speed farming build. That's what Whirlwind does, so that's what we're going to roll with. Pit Fighter up to 3, just more crit. And distant damage reduction, don't have to go further than that now. Hamstring and Cut to the Bone. This just gives us increased bleed damage. Things are going to get vulnerable, and we want to do an increased bleed damage to it. Thick Skin, and the point is to get fortified. Again, just more damage mitigation. Heavy-handed up to 3, more damage for our two-hander. And then Gushing Wounds. Gushing Wounds is a bleed. And as you guys know, a lot of the previous Whirlwind builds revolved around Unbridled Rage because you get so much more damage, but it also consumes an insane amount of Fury. So playing one of these two is going to be fun, but Gushing Wounds is just going to give us so much more bleed damage, and everything's going to be bleeding. It also makes it so we can free up a lot of slots in our gear that would otherwise be dedicated to resource generation or Fury cost reduction, which is really interesting. That opens up a lot more options. So there we go. Wrath of the Berserker. Actually, I need to take 3 from here and put it into Wrath of the Berserker. This is just kind of, you know, our damage ability that we're going to need to have, and it's also going to give us movement speed and increased Fury generation. So we're going to stick with 1 Rallying Cry. I also said earlier that Rallying Cry did Berserking. It's actually War Cry. That was my bad. So we'll save that. For Paragon boards, here's what I'm thinking. And man, I thought about this a lot, and I moved a few boards around, but here's what I'm thinking. First board, you get a lot of strength, so I'm going with Martial. This should allow for shout uptime early, which is really important as you level. And ultimately, I think this is going to be either Martial or one of the other strength ones, like Ire, you're going to put here. I think these could be swapped, but I'm going to start with Martial. Go up here, we're going to get this node for more damage, and then Ire here. You're going to get reduced damage from elites, which is great, and damage while berserking. It's so good. In fact, we might swap these later, but this is what we'll start with. Going to come over here, next board. Go with Wrath. Wrath is still invaluable. You'll just get more critical strike damage and also generate more Fury. It's really good as you start, so we want some of the kind of the bread and butter Fury gen and damage stuff as the first nodes. Next board, this is a really awesome node, and we're going to be focusing on bleeding, so this is going to allow us to have even more berserking uptime, which is fantastic, but it's also going to give us damage increase as well. This node just seems so stupid good. You could even put this earlier. Like, I played around with, maybe I'll have a board where this would be 1 board earlier because it just seems so good, but for now I'm putting it as my 4th board. Traveling up here to Exploit. Exploit should still be good. Vulnerability is nerfed, but you're still going to get enough damage increase, I think, to make it worth it. We don't have it in the thing where we can get the most possible dex, but it still should be good. Next board, we're going to Territorial. Just damage reduction to close enemies and damage to close enemies. All the enemies we're damaging are going to be close, except when we're going so fast that we fly away from them and they're just bleeding ticks. But as long as you're close something, you're going to do more damage to it, and it's going to do less damage to you. So that's perfect. Up here, we're just getting this node on the way to Disembowel, and this is one we're going to play with a little bit because Disembowel, there's so much more cooldown options now because of the Tusk Helm, because people are going to wear Rage of Haragoth, and some other things that this might not eventually be needed, but we are going to use it. It'll be our last one for now. So basically that's what I'm thinking, guys. We'll definitely play around with it. I'm going to go with the Whirlwind Bleed setup. But the vampiric powers are also worth talking about because that's the seasonal mechanic. Here's what I'm thinking is that a cursed touch, you're going to have a higher chance to inflict the curse on it and then spread the curse. So a cursed souls deal 200,000 increased damage. The season is based upon cursing enemies that interacts with a lot of other abilities. So this is a lucky hit ability that should be really good. Prey on the weak, increased damage to vulnerable enemies, and basically everything is going to be vulnerable. Also, what's cool is that enemies are vulnerable while affected by a vampiric curse from your other vampiric powers. So these interact very closely, and basically everything will be vulnerable. Vulnerable damage itself won't be too good, but this should give us a lot of increased damage. This seems really good for a minor power. Major power, Bathe in Blood. This is the one I think might have to be changed on speed farming, and it's unfortunate because it's so freaking good. You're going to do an insane amount of increased damage with your channel skill, which is Whirlwind. It seems made for this build. And 30% damage reduction. It just seems ridiculous, but the problem is, number one, the pool can only form every 8 seconds, and it doesn't move with you. As we've seen from footage in the trailers and such, the pool forms, and if you move away from that, you're not getting the bonus. So this could be really good for like Uber Lilith and bosses and things like that. But for speed farming, it's not going to be that great. So we're going to play around with it. It still seems like it's really good, but we might interchange it when we get so good at speed farming. Sanguine Brace, it's just when you kill an enemy, you fortify for 6% of your base life. So there's a fortified generator. And you also gain 8% critical strike chance when you have more fortify than half of your maximum life, which should be a lot. That you should have this a lot. It's a minor power. Seems pretty good. I think this is a better minor power, but this is still good. And then Flowing Veins. This is just 60% increased damage over time to enemies that are moving or affected by a vampiric curse. We're cursing so much stuff with this. And this is just going to be ridiculous because this whole build is based on berserking and bleed and damage while berserking. So we're going to do so much bleed damage, and this should really just go off and do a ton of damage. So that's basically where I'm at, guys. What do you think about this? I will probably bring a full build guide into the future when we start Season 2. Probably will take a few days, but this is what I'm thinking for Season 2 with the Whirlwind Barbarian. Let me know if you have any suggestions to improve this. I'm going to definitely be playing around with stuff. Paragon, I think, could be tweaked the most, and Skill Tree. Gear, I think, is pretty set, but these three in particular we're going to juggle around and see what works best, but we have to have Relentless Berserker somewhere. So we'll see what happens. It might be Gores that we don't use. We'll see. But that's what it is. Happy hunting. Hope everyone has fun in Season 2. I'll see you on the other side as a Berserker, and if you like this video and other Diablo 4 content that I've done, please like it and subscribe to my channel, and there will be much more. So happy hunting, have fun in Season 2.